call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Thanks everybody for attending. I have no announcements for the meeting, so we'll get right to the agenda. Item number A is to approve the order of agenda.
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner Gunkelman, second by Commissioner Stafford. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Passed. Moving on to item number B, the minutes from our November 2nd meeting. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at those? Any corrections? Does it take a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We have no brown bag planned as item C. Public hearing item, there is just one hearing today, and Megan is ready to go, so we'll let Megan introduce it.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commission. Item 1 is the Urban Plans by Brandt Second Edition. This application is a zone change from LC Limited Commercial with a CO Conditional Overlay to MR3 Multi-Dwelling Residential with a CO Conditional Overlay. The subject property is located at 5100 28th Avenue South. You'll see up on your screen here. It is just next to 51st Street South. Shields Arena is right here to the south, southwest of the property. The applicant is present and would likely want to address the commission. So this item was first heard at the November 2nd Planning Commission meeting, where there was discussion about the project, the history of urban plains, the original vision of a mixed-use, destination-oriented development, whether the vision was still relevant, how the project relates to that vision, and the importance of 51st Street South. The Planning Commission at that meeting, your commission continued the item to this meeting. Since that meeting, I'm sorry, I'll take a step back here. Just to orient yourselves, here's just a couple of images from the site that were taken ahead of the November Planning Commission meeting. Since that meeting, the applicant has indicated that they have a specific target market and can provide some additional information at this meeting. They've also provided some updated documents, including the site plan. So changes on this site plan since your last meeting is the actual shift of the building over to 51st Street, the removal of the parking and circulation on the east side of the building that has moved to the back with some changes to drive aisles and accessory structures. The inclusion of potential for convertible retail, it's a little difficult to see, but you'll see on this plan here the shaded areas have the potential for retail on the site with ground floor parking still being proposed. And the applicant has also shown some additional amenities between the building interface and 51st Street South. Also updated is the master plan from the packet that you received last month. The applicant this is the master plan that the applicant presented to your commission along with the project, which is in the northwest corner right here. And these are updated renderings showing the structure which has moved closer to 51st Street South. Just for reference, this is included in your packet and was also noted last meeting. This is the original vision of 51st Street South within the urban plans area. I'll touch briefly on the conditional overlay. This has not changed since the last meeting. There was only a clarification to one item that caused some slight confusion at the last meeting on item 3.2. And if there's questions on that, I can clarify, but I believe it's this bullet point right here. Staff has not received any inquiries on this application since we first sent notices out. And while the applicant has made modifications to the site plan, including added amenities and the possibility of retail along 51st Street South, staff is still interested in any additional critical review or guidance that the Planning Commission has on the proposal and the original vision of urban plans. So staff is recommending approval with a slightly higher margin than at the last meeting, given the changes that the applicant has made. And please note, this is a slightly revised or updated recommendation than what was in the packet. No big change, but the staff is recommending approval. So that concludes staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks. Anybody have questions for Megan? I do have one question. On the idea of convertible mixed use or whatever that was you described it as, I know in the form-based codes webinar or meeting that planning held a couple weeks ago that I think was an open meeting as well, but there was a comment there by one of the consultants that Fargo has too much of the mixed use with commercial on the main floor, and this was talked about, I think, at that as well. And so this is interesting that it's here. I'm just curious, do we have this elsewhere? Have we seen this work or been convertible? Is that something that's regular?
That's a great question. I believe there, as far as Fargo, I don't know, and I'd maybe look. I know West Fargo, I believe, has one instance of this.
Yes, downtown, there's been some of the apartments built on Roberts that have that first floor and convertible, and maybe the applicant can talk more to that. But, and I think the consultant on the webinar was talking in reference more contextually to nationwide. This is, kind of more of a market thing on the first floor retail that came up in our downtown and focus plan as well. Downtown, or, main floor retail is something in this day and age and market, and there's, kind of some things in flux when it comes to that real estate aspect of main floor retail. So, any case though, but this kind of quasi convertible space has been kind of designed for in some of our downtown locations.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Megan, for letting us know what West Fargo's doing. Any other questions for Megan?
Megan, can you go back to the rendering of what the vision of that area, that right there? I'm seeing a lot of green space, some water recreation, it looks like, and I'm wondering if you could speak to, the applicant today is not the original owner of that property, correct?
I believe that the applicant today is working very closely with the original owner, but I'd let the applicant probably describe that relationship in a little bit more detail.
Okay, I guess I'm just curious because when we're talking about what's feasible or what the market is looking at, I'm not seeing much in this picture that would attract a lot of revenue, a lot of recreation, which would be wonderful. But I think one thing that we've talked about is how the markets have changed, and so I'm just kind of curious if the original owner had, and maybe again that's something that the applicant needs to speak to, but just kind of curious about what this rendering, what kind of revenue they were looking at getting based on this rendering.
I think I'd maybe let the applicant speak if they have any comments related to that. And a quick note, this faces south. And so the green space that you see, I'm going to go quick to the aerial imagery. So in green, this is PI zoned, owned by the Park District, and is this area here, which is kind of how the image is oriented to. And so the park space is a little bit different, as you can see on the aerial image here than the rendering. I don't know if the applicant wants to address that question.
Sure. I'll invite the applicant up to speak. Can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Austin Morris, Enclave Development. So the original vision, and that's why one thing as it relates to development, even south of 52nd Avenue, there's a number of sections that are similar in nature in that this original design, I think, was 2008, 13 years ago. Now we're working on development south of 52nd Avenue. And the original design for that lake, whatever you want to call it, Brenda would hate that I'm calling it a lake, right, Brenda? Pond thing. That was installed and then later failed because it wouldn't hold water because it was designed in a very high location within the property. So then the engineering department, park district, et cetera, had been extensively involved in reconfiguring that whole area to actually function, but still be beautiful. And I think they did a great job of it. I was nervous at first changing it from Urban Plains Pond to Urban Plains meandering canal with wild grasses and everything, but it turned out beautiful. It's just not that anymore. It's not a recreation pond from a navigation perspective. It's now a really nice wildflower park with some meandering trails and provide trail connectivity to our bike system. But I always get nervous with renderings like this, even in our future developments, because I'm always nervous to show a visual depiction 15 years in advance and have people live with that and reference it 10, 15 years down the road. We're working on development south of 52nd Avenue, and I prefer, like we've been working with Nicole and the team on, I'm comfortable showing our ideas relative to zoning from a growth plan perspective. But as soon as I get these really cool renderings from architects or master planning firms like Cunningham Group out of the Twin Cities, who helped me with Sanford All Sports Complex and land to the west, they provide a wonderful depiction. But is that going to be brought up 5, 6, 10 years down the road? This was supposed to be a navigable river. Why is this just a beautiful trail? Well, things do change, and some things involve aspects of either cost, budget, or engineering, and some things are out of our control, and the things that are in our control we can try and work together on and try to solve. So you are right about one thing, is that the intensity of this development surrounding this pond from a valuation standpoint would probably be a quarter of the intensity that was built around there from an overall taxable value standpoint, and the density of occupants within a very small area. And this dream originally was based on the potential of getting an outlet mall, much like we see in Albertville or Maple Grove. We never had the capacity from a population size standpoint, or at least the vision from a national outlet mall rec developer, to make that vision come to life. And we again tried it again. I think another developer in Fargo tried it, where the Sweet Shots is now going, which is going to be a fabulous entertainment destination. But that was also originally planned for a outdoor mall concept. Sorry for being long-winded.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there any other questions for Megan? Otherwise, Austin, did you have any additional comments, or I saw a presentation or anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, the presentation's relatively light, but we tried to work with staff and provide whatever information we could provide in preparation for this meeting. It's a balancing act to providing too much information as we're going for a zoning change with a conditional overlay as opposed to a PUD direction. But we wanted to have you guys and planning department have enough information to digest and know that we're going to do a beautiful project here for the community and in this region. Since then, it wasn't public at the prior meeting that this was going to be an active adult community. We had approval in between that meeting and now to disclose that with our partner. And I do think that adds a considerable value. So we were touring 5 facilities in the Minneapolis metro that are examples of active adult lifestyle-based multifamily communities that are 55 plus, that don't follow the older model of providing a continuum of care. So active adult is basically 55 plus market rate housing with robust amenities and doesn't have an attachment to assisted living, memory care, basic care, etc. And that's something Fargo is missing in all of Fargo from a marketplace standpoint. The closest thing to it would be the one just east of the Goldmark Office Park. I think it's called One Oak Place. That'd be the closest thing to it. The new version of it matches more with luxury multifamily housing. So it's a different model, and we're excited to be able to potentially bring it to Fargo. I do want to touch that the mixed use vision that was along the Urban Plains Park is still being brought to fruition in the place that it should have been planned for in the first place, along Veterans. Veterans is the most robust commercial corridor over the last decade in our communities in between Fargo and West Fargo. And as I shared in the last meeting, we've already executed on this vision down to here, exactly as planned. And we plan to continue to execute on that mission to provide a mixed-use environment that's robust with commercial, retail, multifamily above commercial, and eventually, hopefully down in this neck of the woods, as we work together with planning on what does an entertainment destination look like in this corridor that can help support the Shields Arena from a parking perspective and provide additional amenities for folks. So we went through that last time.
Austin, if you had a pause moment, I guess, could you talk about the convertible spaces and maybe educate us a little bit on that and how that works?
Yep. So I have the sort of site depiction pulled up. We've done this on 300 Lime. We did this where when we're designing the building in an environment where we think it could attract retail development at some point in time, we make sure that the clear story height in between the enclosed parking space is sufficient for retail space. So if we have 14 feet, 16 feet, we can convert part of the parking at some point in the future as retail warrants that, or we always try and think way in the future as the advent of autonomous vehicles, electric cars comes in 10, 15, 20 years. What does transportation look like? Will we own 2 cars per family, or will people own 1 car or not even own a car because they can call a car to them via an app? So as that stuff changes in the future, we wanted to make sure our projects that currently are parked for cars are also able to be even densified greater when we're talking detached garage product. But in this case, if we were able to reduce our parking count in the future because cars weren't as necessary and people owned less cars and were utilizing other resources, how do we design it so we can convert the front or all of the parking space to retail or office? And that's what we've done here, is depict on 51st Street. Here's where the converted retail would look like in the future. And my guess is based on this location, it could make sense at some point in the future, but it still will be lower rent and a lower rent option than what you'd see on Veterans 45th, 32nd, because it is on the interior of a development with very limited traffic.
Thank you. Thank you. There, I was just reading their slide. Any other questions for Austin?
I'd like to ask, I think the last time we viewed this, there was parking on the east side in front of the shops. Is that right?
Yes, there was parking here in the depiction shown. There was a drive lane here that came around, and it also had parking on it. So we're no longer separating 51st Street and Urban Plains Park from what you'd see from a walkable perspective and from a visual interest perspective by another roadway between 51st and the building.
That's a great improvement. It seemed like it was kind of like locked in at last time we met.
Yeah, I like this.
Good.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Commissioner Catholic. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. I guess we didn't do a roll call, did we? Go ahead.
I have a question regarding where the nearest bus stop is for this location.
I do not know offhand, but we can certainly get that information for the commission. I'm not sure if anybody else knows off.
Well, I'm just curious if it's a 55 and older community and some of them are retired and if they don't have, a car, where would they get on, a bus?
I could answer part of that question. So one, the tenant profile on this, the majority in a community like this, like the ones we viewed, still have vehicles. They're actually what you'd consider a 55 plus assisted living skilled nursing facility. that continuum of care drives age rate higher. The facilities that we had folks in their late 60s, early 70s. The average age in an assisted living facility, even in a 55 plus facility, is 83. The other thing most of the facilities have, which we would work out, is private transportation option where we can transport at certain intervals during the day to key locations like West Acres Mall as one example. But all of them had call it a hotel bus from a transportation perspective, and then they also were staffed a little more robustly than a traditional market rate multifamily community.
So just to understand, you said that a lot of the people living this will probably be in their 80s?
70s.
70s, okay.
Yeah.
And the comps, sorry, one more question, is the comps you looked at were in Minneapolis, is that correct, where they're doing this?
Yes, we toured a facility called the Avador, and if you look that one up, that's a great example of what a true 55 plus without the continuum of care attached is. The new generation, from a 55 plus apartment perspective, has less interest in being in a traditional skilled nursing assisted living facility. They'd prefer to live in their homes as long as they can, move to 55 plus, and then at some point in the future when the need is there, to move to a facility with greater continuum of care.
Anything else, Commissioner Tassa?
No, thank you.
Any other questions for Austin? Can I ask, is there anybody else on the phone or another commissioner that we missed? Apologize for not doing roll. I just wanted to give you a chance to speak up here so we know. Hearing none. Close, or anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? Anybody here from the public? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Commissioners, any other questions or comments, or someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the findings of staff as presented in our report.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, will you take the roll?
Morgan,
Aye.
Tassa,
No.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Stoffren, Rosenberg,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Megan. We do have two other items, even though they're not public hearing items, just to let everybody know. And Jim Gilmore's with us today to go over these. They're in your packet, and I believe he has a presentation.
Yes, these are two renewal plans that will go before you for your review and recommendation. Your recommendation is on whether or not they fit with our city plans and basically the Go 2030 plan and whether they fit with the zoning ordinance. I know you've seen both of these recently and you've already made those determinations. And so just what we have in our process is that we want you to kind of finish your work on the zoning before we get into the renewal plans. The renewal plans would create a tax increment financing district and provide some incentives for these developments. Those incentives, that package has already been reviewed by our tax exempt review committee, and so you really don't need to look at kind of the value of those incentives or how those work. Your focus is just on the zoning. The first site that we have is the former Kmart property. The building's been vacant for a while. There used to be a kind of a mall or some retail center on the south side of that picture that was demolished. And so this is the new rendering where the blue would be lower income housing for seniors. We got some good news on that recently. both those phases were approved this year. Typically, you'd only get one year and one the next, but I believe there'd be 88 units of senior housing, which is a major need in the community. The rest of the site would be larger boxes or retail centers, and then pad sites and a car wash on the outside. These are just some examples, and so there's no questions. The recommended motion is to recommend to the City Commission that this renewal plan's consistent with the GO 2030 comprehensive plan for the city.
Any questions for Jim from anybody? Jim, if I could ask, because I know we have at least one new planning commissioner, we don't get these very often. Maybe Nicole too, or could you just go into what's our role in the renewal plan process and maybe where it goes from here, and sort of, if you could just, since we have a little bit of time, what's the continuum here of this type of process and where do we fall?
When someone first comes in and applies for a renewal plan, one of the first questions I have is, have you talked to planning? Have you, does this fit with the zoning? Because if it doesn't fit with the zoning, they need to really make that stop with you first to review any kind of zoning change or any kind of plating change that's needed. So that also goes to our tax exempt review committee, who looks at, does this really the type of redevelopment where tax increment financing is appropriate. So, if it's a green field and there's nothing in the way, then they don't typically need any type of assistance. If in the case of these two properties, you have, buildings that are obsolete and they need redevelopment, if we don't do anything, they'll probably just sit empty or become storage. And so the committee looks at whether or not it's appropriate to try to redevelop this site now rather than wait for it to, deteriorate further or hope that it somehow the market changes and it redevelops. So, but again, your role is to look at more of the land use. Does the plan fit with the adjoining property? And I think you've already, looked at this site already. So.
Any other questions for Jim? I'm kind of curious, when would an example come forward to us when it wouldn't be consistent with the zoning? I mean, so if that's if the renewal plan was sort of brought to us and it needed all the zoning to still change, we would basically say, no, this isn't consistent and send it back to staff. Is that, because I don't think we've ever not approved one of these. And so I'm curious.
Well, I think an example of one where it changed a lot between the first requests was the Newman Center redevelopment. That first request that came in was for a greater density. We just kind of sat back, didn't really work on the renewal plan until they had worked things through with the planning commission and came up with a development that fit. If you had denied that one, I'm trying to think of any cases where it's actually I can think of one case where it was. There's that credit union on 12th Avenue North by T-Lot. There's a group of 6 houses. They had requested that we work on a renewal plan for that. The planning commission wasn't really supportive of the rezoning of that, and so it stopped there at the planning commission level rather than going to city commission.
Thanks, that's helpful for me. Anything else from the commission? Otherwise, there's a recommended motion on the screen. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I had a question, Rocky. So is this our chance to talk about our thoughts on the plan development, everything from layout and use, everything like that? Is that what this opportunity is for?
Staff can answer that.
I mean, if you see something here that doesn't, fit with the zoning, then, or you have, concern about, land use, I suppose you could say it somehow doesn't fit with the plan, but it already fits with the zoning, so.
And I guess, Commissioner Schmidt, you're probably in a unique situation where, I think this is your opportunity, because all this stuff did come for us for zoning and different approvals, we probably had our say. So if you notice something in here that you want to make clear for the record, this is your chance. So anybody can, but we did have a chance. For sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess then I'll just kind of share some thoughts or concerns, maybe questions as well. Knowing that this is going to be a TIF project and seeing the uses that are on here, when I look at all the parcels how they're divided up and the amount of parking that's there, it seems like we're incentivizing a parking lot. I mean, I look, for example, how it's broken down: coffee, required parking 6, and it's provided with 19. It just seems kind of, to me, that personally seems very excessive, and for an area where we're offering incentives, is this the type of development that we're looking to incentivize? Right, I know that we do brown bags and lunch and learns, and we attend things like the Main Street Summit, and we learn about these things like developments that are really intense with bringing in tax revenue and great use of land, and how we should be developing further to make Fargo a really great place. And I see this, and I just see this as typical suburban development that doesn't bring, there's nothing different between this and something that's in Lincoln, Nebraska, or Sioux Falls, and it's very generic. I know it's better than a Kmart that's vacant, but I guess I don't know if it's a question or a thought, but is this really the type of use that we want to incentivize? That's auto-oriented.
I mean,
suburban.
I think I kind of went back to this slide. This is what we have now. It's certainly a huge amount of parking that was, what they, did, back in the 70s when they had, some more retail there and a large store. I mean, I'm sure the day after Thanksgiving, they had plenty, even then they had plenty of parking. But Austin, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, does the number of your parking spaces exceed the land development code by much, or to what extent it does? I don't know if sometimes there's going to be a little bit of shared parking here where people who live in that, building may be able to, just walk over there, people in the neighborhood.
So I would share that from a land use standpoint, we put together a preliminary site plan that was maintaining the zoning at what it's currently zoned within this block, other than the CUP on the multifamily side for beyond shelters 55 plus. But when we look at parking counts for a suburban retail center, our goal is to under-park it to the extent possible with shared parking allocation. This one, we think that we can fit some additional parking by growing the retail north. But in the end, we're not motivated to have more stalls than we need, but we also are motivated we have to meet the minimum standards, and we also need enough parking to be able to lease space. If we were showing a tenant that we had 3.5 stalls per 1,000 in that retail center, we wouldn't lease space. We actually, in a similar center, are tearing down, in Moorhead, tearing down part of the building because they have 2.75 stalls per 1,000. Well, retail center doesn't function like that, especially in a suburban area like this. So,
And maybe Commissioner, I'd be glad to add to that. I think maybe Austin, while you're still there, thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Schmidt. I think when you look at the renewal plan and the financial request, I think from the neighborhood of 1.4 or so, I think what this renewal plan doesn't show is probably quite a long discussion on some original zoning applications and pre-development or redevelopment discussions. I know you're very familiar with Go 2030, and if you were to look at the centerfold of Go 2030, it has kind of this grand plan. We had lots of kind of one-on-one discussions with Jim's team and Austin's team. And for me, as a planner and someone that's obviously very connected to Go 2030, I think it was really interesting to see the financial disparities between that vision of Go 2030 and the redevelopment to demo the site. And I think in that range of requests, and maybe Tim or Austin could I think there was anywhere from, $24 million of discussion to $12 million to discussion, and then today at the, 1.4. And, really, when you look at what those monies are going towards, really to bring the site to a greenfield, and so that it's in cost comparison to the, to Southside new development. And I think the question that came at hand, quite a lot of discussion at the staff level, and you would see this at the zoning and subdivision process, was, I think the city leaders are at a point of, do we sit and wait on a piece of property that's blighted to meet the market at a future range? Or do we, kind of embrace this interim type of development? We get the affordable housing, and we take care of the blight. And actually, this site plan is maybe better than what we saw initially, and at least from an urban planner perspective. And so, I think a lot of those discussions. You bring up a great question, and I think a lot of discussions were had at the administrative level, and to look at the range of financial requests that the Enclave team brought forward was quite interesting from my perspective, and maybe Jim can speak to that a little bit more.
I think one other thing on that beyond shelter, and I don't know if anyone recalls if you did a parking reduction for that, because typically for the senior housing, we don't need the 2 point so many parking spots per stall when it's generally 55 plus and typically 1 car per household.
I'd just like to make a comment, but it doesn't have to do with the TIF or whether the zoning is correct, but I've talked to people who are very concerned about what's going to happen to that space who live east of University, because they're interested in their land values. And that neighborhood to the west of the Kmart has been problematic for a long time in terms of crime and difficulties with tenants. To me, this looks like it's just a continuation of the commercial district, which is fine, but that's what it's going to be. It's certainly nothing outstanding. It's not an amenity to those east of University or probably south of there either, but it is a fix. As Nicole said, it's better than what had been proposed previously. And I agree with Thomas that this is something that's very pedestrian in terms of taking a look at it and seeing, is this something that we can be proud of for Fargo, or is it just something that you're going to fly by as traveling south or north on University? And it's a flyby kind of place. And I don't think it's really bringing much of a enhancement to the neighborhoods that are trying to maintain themselves down there.
I should note this, one of the challenges of getting some good senior housing around town is finding some sites that are more close in rather than out on the edge. And, this has a major bus stop. Bus route goes right by here. And so a lot of the people are going to be relying on transit. So anytime we can find these sites, they're on existing bus routes, that's important. It's close enough to shopping. And so I think, this does enhance the neighborhood, and it brings some new housing into the area, more people watching that site than we have now, sort of more of a 24-hour activity versus a commercial center that, again, is just blank with not much going on at night.
It's kind of fun to have a item that's not a public hearing so we can have some more open discussion. But I guess from my standpoint, this is a great project for those homes to the east. I mean, you look at this whole University corridor from 13th Avenue down to 32nd, and it's just slowly has been dying for the last 2 decades. You're starting to see new developments. Obviously, the Starbucks on University that I go to every day is very, very busy. And you get down here and it's just empty. If this can bring back life into this, it's going to stop all those from deteriorating. I mean, there's a reason why that neighborhood to the west is deteriorated, is because this property is also deteriorated. they go hand in hand. And so you find somebody that's willing to come in and take a chance on this property to redevelopment. It's not like everybody was beating down our door as a city to redevelop this. It's been sitting there a while. I'm excited that this hopefully can sort of curb the tide of deterioration of both east and west. And maybe that convinces somebody to put more money into another neighboring property, or, you know, the properties just to the south along University that are slowly dwindling as well. So I don't know. To me, I'm pretty happy about this development coming in and doing something, because this was very much a blighted area of our city, and turning blight into something new is a heavy lift. It's not a high-class outlet mall type thing, but or whatever else we're looking for, but it's going to be new property and new investment. That said, I think there's lots of little things, you know, like you brought up, Commissioner Schmidt, that probably would be a healthier discussion to have during our zoning time, which we're happy to have you on the commission for the next go around. Yeah, Commissioner Stauffer.
Question for Austin. You know, this is a conceptual master plan, but what is your time frame to start to be able to execute on it? And do you anticipate that as you work on this, that there will be additional changes in the concepts that you have here?
One second. Are we okay asking developers to come up during these, even though it's not a public hearing?
Yeah, you're fine. That open discussion. I invited them here in case there were any questions.
Okay, so I just wanted to double check.
So I know what I know, which is that we can do, from a zoning standpoint, commercial development. I'm confident that we'll start the retail center, which is the long linear north-south building toward the center. We'll start that this spring, summer. We have letters of intent for pad sites, for 2 pad sites that would want to start this summer. And then the car wash, as depicted, would start spring. The only site on here, the only 2 sites that haven't been spoken for are the Burger King site, and that's in a lease. But eventually that will either A, renew with complete redevelopment, or they'll vacate and that'll be another pad site available, likely for a QSR or some sort of restaurant concept. Then we have the pad site to the southwest that would be available just to the west of the car wash. So I think all of it will be done except for probably the Burger King within the next 18 months.
Thank you.
What about Beyond Shelter?
That's been, the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency approved the funding 2 weeks ago, and so I think at least the first phase will go this year, probably more likely into the fall. I don't know, Jim, if you, is that their schedule? But they're not going to be able to buy this site unless we do the renewal plan and clear the Kmart building. That's just part of the entire package, and so and those grants for the housing are extremely competitive, so we hate to lose those.
Any other comments on this? We have a motion by Commissioner Gunkelman. I assume the recommended motion.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Motion and second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll take the roll.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to the second item with Jim here, the other renewal plan.
The renewal plan, this is some video from last December. This property, at least in my mind, was blighted before the fire, but certainly it's in really bad shape now. And so, this is just an incentive to help clean up that mess and create a new housing project close to the downtown. Again, you've seen this went through rezoning, and it's now zoned downtown mixed use. This is just an air photo of the site. You can see the kind of burned out building. Most of that building is down, but still a lot of the rubble and foundations remain. Just a picture on the from the street. This is the concept that Kevin Bartram has designed called the J Street project. Originally, just trivia here, 14.5 Street was platted as J Street, so that's where the name came from. You can see, so this would be relatively, high density, because it's downtown mixed use. You don't need the 2 whatever parking spots per stall, and so again, I think this would be a nice addition to this area to help, clear that site and provide some more housing and activity, sort of as an infill site, just like Go 2030 called for. So, recommendation is to approve the renewal plan. I believe. Any questions of myself, the developer?
Jim, just one question. When we approved the zoning as a planning commission, we approved a couple of the adjacent properties with it as well. So when we go through the renewable plan process, is it just this one property that's on there? Or?
Yeah, the renewal plan would be just within this blue area. And so, longer term, maybe if those other sites on the south side of the block become available, that could be a mirror image of that, of another housing project. There's probably enough room to do that should there be a market. So I don't know if there'd be main floor parking, and maybe I think he was joking. He's going to take pictures of all those statues and put them along the mirror as murals. But.
Is the building purposely a J? I mean, because of the J Street? That just happened?
I'll ask Kevin. No.
Oh. Yeah. Any questions for Jim on this? Or for Mr. Bartram since he's here?
I'd like to ask Kevin to come up and just tell us a little bit more about the project. I've been following it quite closely.
If you're okay coming up,
Is that okay?
please introduce yourself and then we'll ask the question maybe once he's at the podium.
Oh, okay.
I'm Kevin Bartram with MBA Architects. And I guess we can answer any questions. Just real briefly, the plan is on-grade parking and closed parking on first floor and then 3 stories of apartments. It's about 90 apartment units. And it's a pretty straightforward project from that standpoint. We're working with the city to improve 14.5 Street or J Street. Right now it's a gravel parking lot or a gravel street. And there's one block of NP Avenue that would be improved at the same time too. So that whole area would get improved just with the street improvements, if nothing else, plus the building on that block. So like I said, it's a pretty straightforward project, but we're kind of excited for that addition along First Avenue to support some of the other projects that have developed in that area in the last few years.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yeah, well, thank you. I just have been, as I said, I've been following it for a long time and stopping down there in recent years, and obviously something needed to change there, and it's definitely needed in the neighborhood, especially right off University there. There's a lot of much improvement that could be done in that area. There's a lot of people walking from that area downtown, and are your rates going to be market rates then?
Yeah, it'll be market rate apartments. It might be a little off the numbers that are in the downtown area, but I think that's a good thing if the numbers, the rents are a little bit lower. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions while we have Kevin at the podium? Not, thank you, Mr. Bartram. Any other questions for Jim? Commissioner Schmidt, since you haven't seen this yet? Yeah.
No, I just want to say I'm excited for the project. It's much improvement for that area, so looking forward to it.
Otherwise, there's a recommended motion on the screen, or do you want to make a different motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? You take the roll.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. The motion passes. Staff, anything else for us? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. The meeting is adjourned.